Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Today, we're stuck indoors due to weather, but we're going to be discussing one of the newer and more popular Sigma Art Series lenses, the 14 to 24mm f2.8. So this is a full-frame, wide-angle lens with a fast constant aperture that you can buy in both Canon and Nikon mount. And it's particularly interesting because it has some direct competition from existing first-party lenses, notably the Nikon 14 to 24 2.8 and Canon's 11 to 24 f4 or 16 to 35 2.8. It also is even competing against some other third-party lenses like Tamron's popular 15 to 30 2.8. However, when you compare it to those Canon and Nikon lenses, this Sigma lens is about $1,000 to $2,000 Australian cheaper than those lenses, and for that reason it has people very excited about it. So we're going to be evaluating the performance of this lens today, and we're going to start by looking at the build quality of the lens. So if you've been in the photography world for a little while now, you've probably become familiar with the look of the Sigma Art Series by now. This lens has that same look, which I personally think is a very high quality polished look. The build quality is very, very high. It has a focus distance meter, a really nice feeling zoom ring and focus ring. The action on these is really, really nice, and an autofocus manual focus switch. Now, it is a fairly heavy lens, as the Art Series lenses tend to be, but it's not out of line with the other wide-angle lenses in this category that it's competing against. Also, like almost all ultra-wide lenses, it has a built-in lens hood, meaning you can't remove the lens hood, and you're not going to be able to use standard circular filters like most other lenses would be able to take. As a result, the lens cap actually fits over the entirety of that hood. Now, normally one of the disadvantages of Sigma's Art Series lenses is that they generally have not been weather sealed, but this lens bucks that trend, and Sigma actually has added weather sealing on this lens. So that means you can take it out in adverse weather conditions, rain, and so on. That's great because ultrawides like this are often used for landscape photography where you're going to be outdoors and exposed to the elements. So that's very nice to have on this lens. So one of the well-known features of the Sigma Art Series lineup is high image quality, and happily this lens follows that trend as well. The image quality coming out of this 14-24mm lens is very, very high. It's super, super sharp in the center of the frame as well as in the extreme corners, and even when you're shooting at its lowest maximum aperture of f2.8. So excellent marks for image quality on this lens. With a lens this wide, you're going to be seeing some distortion. That's kind of unavoidable in an ultra-wide angle. Certainly it is in this lens, but I think it's fairly well controlled. It's there, but it's not prevalent. It's not going to take over your photos. You're going to see it a bit more the closer you are to your subject, but in most instances of kind of your regular shooting distance, for most photos, I think it's quite well controlled and no issues there. In fact, I think it's better controlled than many ultra-wides are. Vignetting is also something that we often see in ultra-wide angle lenses, and again, it is in this lens. You do see some vignetting at the lower apertures. Once you stop it down a little bit to f4 or so, that starts to disappear primarily. But it is there in the lower apertures. Again, fairly well controlled, not too big of a concern, and it is something that is easily fixable in Lightroom after the fact, so I'm not too concerned about that. And finally is flaring. Again, something that's important for a wide-angle lens because with a frame that wide, you're often going to have at least one light source in your photo. Flaring is also fairly well controlled in this lens, so a good job all around, excellent image quality, good control of distortion, flaring, and vignetting. So obviously a big feature of this lens is the constant 2.8 aperture. So it's a very fast lens, can let in a lot of light, that also helps with shallow depth of field. However, because it's such a wide-angle lens, the shallow depth of field aspect of it is going to be a bit more secondary than it might be in some other lenses. The reason for this is that a wide focal length has less shallow depth of field than a more telephoto focal length. So for that reason, you certainly can still get shallow depth of field, but it's not going to be the primary use of the fast aperture on this lens. Instead, the primary benefit of the 2.8 aperture is going to be in its light gathering capability. So this lens is going to be helpful if you're often shooting in lower light situations. Particularly indoor shooting, this is very, very useful for. That's the reason why wedding photographers like this lens quite a bit. It's very easy to shoot in a dim church or a reception hall. If you're going to be shooting in low light situations in general, that f2.8 aperture is very helpful. The autofocus in this lens is fine. It's adequate. It does a decent job. This is one of the few areas where you're probably not going to hear me say, it's excellent or fantastic or whatever, really, really good. I think it's adequate, it's satisfactory. I had no issues with it. I didn't think it was amazing and blew me away in any way, but it was perfectly serviceable. The lens is certainly very usable for video shooting as well. The 2.8 aperture here is a bonus again because that just gives you more flexibility over the amount of light coming into the lens, which gives you more control over the shutter speed. Obviously in video you have a few more constraint over shutter speed than in photos, so that's handy. Now the lens doesn't have image stabilization. That would have been very nice for handheld video shooting and also for photos. It's kind of the one area of weakness I could point to about the lens. That's not a big surprise. Again, very few of the Sigma Art Series lenses have image stabilization. And being a wide-angle lens, it's even less important on this lens than it might be on a telephoto, so not a big knock against it, but it would have been nice to have. And finally, the manual focus ring on the lens is very, very nice. The action on it is extremely smooth, and I really like using it for controlling manual focus for video, so that was a big bonus. So like almost all of the Sigma Art series lenses, the 14 to 24mm lens is a very high performer. The image quality is excellent even when you're shooting at the max aperture. Flare, vignetting, and distortion are all well controlled. The fast 2.8 aperture is very handy for shooting in low light situations. Build quality is excellent, and the autofocus system is serviceable. When you put that all together in a lens that is significantly cheaper than Canon and Nikon's offering in this area, that means that this 14 to 24mm lens is a very attractive option for someone looking for a full-frame ultra-wide lens. Value-wise, it's a very, very good value lens. It's still not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than you would pay from Canon or Nikon for the same quality lens. Now the 14 to 24mm 2.8 is available now. You can order it on our website at www.digidirect.com.au, or you can come into one of our stores where you can try it out for yourself. We have stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, which is just outside of the Perth CBD. Thanks guys, take care.